At the very same moment when the mother, cradling her daughter in her arms, left behind the house filled with anger and condemnation, her world was turned upside down forever. On the cold pavement of a new life, where each raindrop promised both pain and a spark of hope, she took her first step into the unknown. And in that instant, a story was born, one of love, betrayal, and laughter, capable of transforming tragedy into an epic tale. Night had descended upon the city, wrapping it in a thin veil of fog and sparse lights, like the last glimmers of long-forgotten dreams. In an alley where old houses stood as silent witnesses of the past, fates intertwined in a strange, almost theatrical whirlwind of events, and in that vortex of destinies appeared Eleanor's figure, a young woman who had decided to break the chains of her accustomed world and embrace the stormy life ahead. Eleanor walked quickly, almost running along the wet cobblestone streets, feeling how each of her movements echoed deep within her soul. She could no longer endure the blows of fate, the cold, disapproving looks of her parents, and the harsh words that shattered her heart into tiny fragments. In her memory, her mother's cries rang out once more, when with a blurred yet icy voice she declared, "How could you, Elena? 4 months pregnant. Is no time for such foolishness. We'll raise the child ourselves if need be." Those words pierced her fragile shell of self-assurance like arrows, but despite the pain, she knew firmly. Love was what mattered most. Roman, her husband, was far from the ideal her parents might have wished for, yet it was in him that she saw a saving light amid the gloom of doubts and external expectations. He possessed that rare ability to mix light-heartedness with deep sincerity, to make her laugh even in the darkest moments. She recalled his infectious smile and the phrase he had uttered on that fateful evening. "Eleanor, if love is madness, then I am ready to be mad until the end of the world." In that cheerful, almost mocking tone, he tried to dispel the darkness that enveloped her mind. But the bitter reality returned. Her parents did not accept him, nor did they accept her choice. Her father, Victor, with a stern gaze and heavy words, threatened as if any trivial matter could become a pretext for a final break in relations. "I don't need a son-in-law, no matter what money or promises you offer. If you do not end this vicious union, the door of my house will remain closed to you forever." Her father's words struck like an icy blow to her heart, yet in that moment a determination began to boil inside Elena. She could no longer live by rules dictated by others, rules that allowed them to decide for her. Injustice was crashing down on her from all sides like a force of nature, and she understood it was time to act. On that fateful night, when her parents had staged a veritable gallery of anger and despair against her, Elena made a decision that would change her life forever. In haste, she wrote a short note, devoid of any excuses or tears, just firm, almost mechanical lines that reflected all the pain and determination of her soul. The note was as laconic as a knife's thrust. "I'm leaving. Forgive me, but I can no longer live in the cage of other people's prejudices. I love, and that fills my life with meaning. Goodbye." There were no hints of regret or pleas for understanding, only a cold, calculated decision to leave, to take her fate into her own hands, and to risk everything for love and freedom. Gathering her strength, she quietly left the house, not looking back, although inside she screamed in pain at the thought of loss and fear of the unknown. Every second felt like an eternity as she dashed through the corridors of the old building, leaving behind memories of a childhood filled with joys and celebrations of life. The corridors, once filled with the noise of parental quarrels, now appeared deserted, as if time had stood still, allowing her a moment to forget all the grievances and burdens. Outside, the rain began to intensify, washing away the last traces of former luxury from the sidewalks and leaving only cold droplets on her cheeks. On the slippery cobblestones, the reflections of streetlights shone like myriad little stars, offering hope even in the darkest moments. Eleanor knew where her parents kept their money, the very secret that had once been her little clandestine treasure, and now became her only chance at a new life. She decided to take it, even if only temporarily, to rent a room for half a year and start anew. The money, as a symbol of freedom, seemed to her like a lifebuoy in this turbulent sea of life. The path to a new future was not paved with gold and rose petals. Eleanor and Roman were students, without housing, without a stable job, but with an inexhaustible desire to love and believe in miracles. Their hasty marriage had been almost a spontaneous decision, born in the fire of passions and laughter, when time itself seemed to speed up, as if spurred on by the energy of youth. Flashes of joyful student parties, conversations lasting until dawn, dreams as vast as the world. This all accompanied them until the parents unleashed the abyss of disapproval. In the small room they rented with that money, Roman's laughter and Elena's tender glances merged into one. However, time passed, and new trials began to loom on the horizon. Roman, though loving, was an unreliable man. His studies, constant excuses, and lack of a clear plan for the future. The initial funds quickly ran out, and promises of stability and a shared future evaporated like smoke in the morning sun. Life seemed to play a cruel prank on them. When the moment came for Eleanor to give birth, fate again played a wicked joke. One ordinary day, when Roman, absorbed in his studies, left her alone with increasing pain and fear, contractions began. With anxiety in her heart and pain that made it almost difficult to breathe, she rushed by ambulance to the maternity hospital. The ambulance ride, where every second stretched on interminably, left scars in her memory and an emptiness in her heart from the realization of her loneliness. By evening, as the sounds of another rainy night resonated, the first cry of the newborn filled the maternity ward. Eleanor, exhausted and worn out, felt an inner turmoil. The joy of new life was intermingled with anxiety about the future, about the one who had promised to be by her side, but never came. Clutching her phone in hand, she called Roman, yet every call went unanswered. In the silence of the hospital corridors, only her own, mute cry of loneliness could be heard. Time dragged on, and thoughts swirled in her head like leaves in an autumn whirlwind. What now? Where had he gone? Had his love proved as ephemeral as the student dreams that dissolved in morning coffee? These questions tore her apart, making her heart beat in a rhythm of indecision and pain. Finally, when the last rays of dusk gave way to the darkness of night, Eleanor left the hospital with her daughter in her arms, feeling that the storm of emotions still raged within. She boarded the subway, trying to find even a moment's respite from the clamour and pain, yet the thought that everything at home had changed haunted her. At every stop, in every sound of the trains, she could hear echoes of past days when everything seemed simple and clear. Returning home, almost on edge, she knocked on the door, hoping to find even a spark of familiar comfort. The door was opened by a woman with a tired look, who seemed not to have expected a visitor, and then, as if having silently listened to the story of her losses, the woman coldly informed her, "The room was rented 3 days ago for a year." Those words, spoken in an even, almost indifferent tone, struck Elena like thunder on a clear day. Her world, which until yesterday had been filled with love and hope, turned in a single moment into an empty shell, devoid of any support. No trace of Roman, no trace of their belongings, only emptiness and the siege of betrayal. Images swirled in her mind. How could one so quickly lose everything dear? Where was Roman now, with whom she had shared dreams and laughter? Eleanor's gaze drifted into emptiness, and tears, long held at bay deep inside, began to run along her cheeks. Yet despite all the pain and resentment, a remnant of her former strength remained in her heart. The strength to love, to fight, and perhaps even to laugh at the absurdity of her fate. She left the house, holding her newborn daughter close, as if seeking protection in that small, helpless being. The street greeted her with a cold wind that seemed intent on erasing all traces of former joy, leaving only a bitter aftertaste of disappointment. Each raindrop falling from the sky served as a reminder that life can be unjust, unpredictable, and sometimes even cruel. Memories of how it all began danced in Elena's head. There was a time when dreams shone bright like sparks in the night sky, when every day promised something wondrous and new. Back then, Roman could tell stories that made her laugh until tears flowed, as they dreamed together of a future full of adventures and unexpected twists. He had said that life was a series of coincidences and that it was better to laugh about them than to cry. But now, standing on the threshold of a new, unpredictable chapter, she could not help but sense the bitter irony of fate. "Roman, where the heck did you disappear?" she silently shouted, recalling his light-hearted promises and his confidence that everything would be all right. In her imagination, playful scenes unfolded where he had smiled and said, "Life is a comedy, my dear, and we are its main characters." But now that phrase sounded like an empty echo in a hall of shattered hopes. Walking along the streets, Eleanor tried to find solace in small things. The laughter of passers-by, the shimmering lights in shop windows, even the quiet sound of music emanating from open cafes. It all seemed like an unattainable fairy tale she once knew, now reduced to a bitter reminder of a past that could never be regained. In every step, in every sigh, her determination resonated. To not be broken, to not give in, even if the world seemed to crumble around her. After a while, she paused by a small park where the trees seemed to whisper words of consolation. Eleanor sat on a bench, clutching her newborn daughter to her chest, and tried to make sense of her swirling emotions. Memories of her parents' reproaches, of Roman's promises, of the happy days when everything seemed possible, blended with the realization that life was a game. One where sometimes the victor was the one who kept moving forward despite the losses. Through her tears, she remembered a moment at a student party when Roman, slightly out of breath from laughing, had said, "If life hands you lemons, we'll make lemonade, even if we've run out of sugar." That simple, ordinary joke now seemed imbued with a special meaning, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a spark of humor can be found. For laughter was a way to defy pain, a means to show that even in the depths of despair there was room for light. She smiled softly, understanding that in this new, harsh reality, she would have to learn to laugh at her own misfortunes, even if it seemed absurd. Sitting in the park, Eleanor gazed at the puddles reflecting the shimmering glow of street lamps, pondering how cruel and unjust life could be. Each raindrop falling from the sky was like a small reminder that even after the fiercest storm, calm eventually follows. She knew that new trials, new losses, and perhaps new disappointments awaited her. Yet within her, a seed of determination was already germinating, a seed that, despite all the hardships, promised to give rise to something beautiful. Her thoughts turned to plans for the future, though they seemed as elusive as a distant star twinkling in the night sky. Eleanor dreamed of a small, cozy corner where she could raise her daughter, where laughter would once again fill the rooms and sorrow would yield to new hope. But that dream was far from reality, a phantom, a mere glimmer on the horizon. She understood that the road ahead would be long and arduous, that each step would be taken on thin ice, where any misstep could lead to a fall. Yet, on that very bench in the park, she felt a new strength budding inside her. A strength that, despite all the blows dealt by fate, made her heart beat with fresh energy and determination. Her eyes, filled with both melancholy and bold hope, lifted to the sky where, through grey clouds, the last light of a star peeked through. It was a sign that even in the darkest night there is room for light, for love, for a new beginning. With that thought, Eleanor rose, holding her daughter close and took her first tentative steps into the unknown. The wind whispered in her ear, carrying away the remnants of bygone illusions, leaving behind only the pure, undeniable truth. Life goes on, and every new dawn brings a chance to start over. A wry smile played on her lips, as if fate itself had decided to laugh at her misfortunes, giving her the opportunity to find humour in tragedy. And so, walking down the empty street, Eleanor no longer felt defeated. Though her soul was wounded, it burned with a strange, almost imperceptible optimism, a hope born from the understanding that every loss was not an end, but merely a passage to something new. She knew that endless days of struggle lay ahead, yet she also believed that if she could overcome all the challenges, she would build a life where love and laughter would again be the leading characters. Thus ended the first chapter of her long, arduous, yet astonishingly humorous journey toward freedom. A journey in which every minute was imbued with a sense of dignity, where even the cruelest blows of fate could not extinguish her inner flame. Eleanor moved forward, leaving behind a world where her love had been seen as alien and unwelcome, and stepping into a new era where every step, every word, every breath was filled with meaning and the promise of a brighter future. And although the road ahead was uncertain, fraught with lost dreams and broken promises, she knew one thing for sure. To be happy was not to depend on the judgments of others, but to find joy in each new day, no matter how bitter the losses. With that resolve, mingled with a touch of self-mockery at her own fate, Eleanor continued onward, leaving behind the echo of shattered hopes and the laughter that, like a quiet protest, resonated even in the darkest corners of her soul. Thus concluded the chapter, first yet fateful, the story of a woman who refused to live by others' rules and decided to write the script of her life herself, a script filled with love, pain, and unexpected humour, where even tears could transform into drops of laughter, and every farewell became the beginning of a new, astonishing story. At dawn, as the city was just beginning to wake from a long winter's sleep, Eleanor was already on the move. Through the fogged-up subway window, the lights of the awakening city flickered by, while her thoughts flitted between the past, like shattered pieces of glass, and a future full of promises of new trials. Inside her soul, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and a strange, barely perceptible humour still simmered, the kind that could bring a smile even to someone who seemed to have lost faith in everything. Last night, after the nightmare events when the maternity ward was filled with silence and emptiness, Eleanor felt as though her life was breaking apart into millions of tiny, uncontrollable fragments. Yet, in that chaos, she realized she could no longer afford to stop. She had to move forward despite all the pain and betrayal. When it came to thoughts of Roman, she was left with nothing but perplexity and a slight irony, as if fate had decided to play yet another prank. Think about it. Studies, money, plans. And where are you, Roman? Eleanor asked herself, trying to find some sense of fairness in this mad kaleidoscope. Soon, after exiting the subway, she found herself on a busy street, where the morning clamour of a waking city mixed with the echo of her loneliness. Her eyes involuntarily lingered on the passers-by, busy with their own affairs. Someone was hurrying to work, someone was chasing after a bus, and someone else seemed simply to be enjoying the moment, unaware of how cruel life could be. Every person appeared to her as a tiny island in an ocean of disappointments and hopes, an island that managed to shine even in the darkest times. Eleanor walked down the street, clutching her newborn daughter to her chest, as if trying to preserve even a drop of lost warmth. But the cold morning wind, whispering mysterious words, made her wonder. What now? Where could she find support when even home seemed to have turned its back on her? Yet within that bitter, painful question lay a spark of determination. She knew now her life belonged only to her strength, to her laughter in the face of the absurdity of the world. At the street corner, where the morning promised brightness, her gaze suddenly fell upon an old cafe where friends from her student days used to gather. The place evoked memories of those days when laughter and jokes were the main sustenance for the soul. How much everything has changed, Elena thought, and she resolved to go in, perhaps to immerse herself even for a minute in the atmosphere of the past, where hope was tangible. Inside the cafe, a pleasant hustle and bustle reigned. The clink of dishes, soft conversations, gentle music, a subtle attempt to warm the hearts of passers-by. At a corner table sat Maria, an old friend of Elena's, who, upon noticing her arrival, soon exclaimed, "Elena, I haven't seen you in so long. How's life? Are you battling fate again?" Elena sat down across from her, and a barely noticeable smile, mixed with sadness and fatigue, played on her lips. "So, Maria," she began quietly, lowering her gaze to her palms, "life, it seems, knows how to surprise. Today I woke up and everything around me seemed upside down. The maternity ward, an empty home, and Roman. He was no longer by my side." Her friend frowned, reaching for a cup of hot coffee that seemed capable of warming even the iciest heart. "That's terrible, but maybe it's for the best," Maria asked with a touch of gentle humor, adding, "You know, sometimes when everything goes awry, the universe is simply preparing a surprise for us. Perhaps you haven't yet seen what amazing new chapter awaits you just around the corner." Eleanor pondered her friend's words. Indeed, every step she took, every twist of fate, was like an unpredictable joke that only life itself could understand. But despite the bitterness of her loss, a tiny spark of faith glowed within her, that even after the longest night, morning would always come. "Remember how we used to laugh together, saying that life is one big comedy?" Maria continued, nodding toward the window through which soft rays of dawn filtered. "Even now, perhaps we should try to find something funny in this tragicomedy. After all, if life gives you lemons, why not make lemonade?" Eleanor couldn't help but laugh, and for a moment that spark of joy, so scarce in recent days, flickered in her eyes. Her friend's joke was like a cool drop in a burning heart. It comforted her a little, cheered her up somewhat, and made her momentarily forget the bitter losses and unpredictable disappointments. As they sat together in the cozy cafe, discussing the little things in life, fragments of memories still echoed in Eleanor's mind. Her parents' threats, the cold words from a stranger, phone calls that went unanswered. But gradually, like the petals of a blooming flower, a new picture of the future began to emerge around her. A future in which, despite all obstacles, she could find her own harmony and happiness. Eleanor told Maria about her plans to start over. "I've already rented a small room on the outskirts," she said, trying to infuse her voice with confidence. "And the money, I took it, but I promise I'll pay it back once I manage to settle down properly." Roman, it seems, never understood what it meant to be there when help was truly needed. Maria, listening to her friend, couldn't resist adding a sarcastic remark. "Well, Elena, it happens. Life isn't always a fairy tale with a happy ending. Sometimes it's a tragicomedy where you have to play the lead role in your own show. But the most important thing is never to forget. Laughter is medicine, even if it can't cure all ills." Maria's words cheered Elena up. She understood that the road ahead would be difficult and full of trials. But at the same time, she realized that every little thing, every funny incident, and even every tear was part of her grand story. A story of a woman who never gave up and could find a reason to smile even in the darkest moments. At one point, the conversation drifted to those times when life had seemed completely different, when dreams were more real and plans more tangible. Eleanor recalled a student party where Roman, with a glass of wine in hand and a sparkle in his eyes, had promised her, "We'll build a castle where every room will be filled with laughter and every street with music." Those words, full of hope and verve, now seemed distant and almost fairy tale-like. Yet it was these memories, like a soft whisper from the past, that gave her strength to keep moving forward. "You know, Maria," she said as the conversation turned to the future, "I still believe that something better awaits me. Maybe I'll become the one who not only survives, but rises from the ashes like a phoenix. After all, every tragedy, no matter how heavy, gives you a chance to discover new strength." Maria smiled and supported her. "Of course, Eleanor, life is always both tragedy and comedy at the same time. The main thing is to know how to laugh, even when tears are streaming down. And you, more than anyone, know how to find light in the darkness." Thus, over cups of aromatic coffee, time seemed to stand still. The friends, with a mix of melancholy and hope in their voices, shared dreams, plans, and, of course, memories of a time when life was like a game in which everyone played by their own rules. But now the rules had changed, and every minute demanded incredible courage to keep going and not let the pain overshadow the good. Leaving the cafe, Eleanor felt a new emotion stirring in her heart, a desire to fight on, no matter what. The sounds of the city reached her ears, cars beginning their workday, voices of passers-by hurrying along with their own tasks, and in this stream of life, she found solace. Every step on the cold asphalt felt like a sign that life goes on, and so, even if her dreams were shattered into fragments, they could still be gathered into something beautiful. On an empty street, beneath the glow of the morning sun, Eleanor paused at the window of a small shop, where bright signs and enticing displays awakened in her memories of times gone by. She remembered how, as a child, she had dreamed of wonders and fairy tales where good always triumphed over evil and smiles brought joy. These thoughts seemed to warm her cold heart, making her feel a little less alone. Fragments of past conversations, bits of laughter, snippets of tears, all intermingled into a single, intricate tapestry of her soul. Eleanor couldn't understand how everything had changed so abruptly. Yesterday, everything was so simple, and today, new challenges appeared at every turn. Yet, reflecting on the path she had travelled, she understood that these very trials hardened her, made her stronger, and taught her to cherish even the smallest spark of joy. And so, at a street intersection, she stopped to take a deep breath. The wind played with her hair, and the sunlight, breaking through the clouds, made her heart beat with renewed strength. "This is only the beginning," she thought, "and even if tomorrow is as harsh, I will find the strength to smile." With that thought, she took yet another step forward, confident that every new day brought her closer to herself, to the dream she had not yet fully grasped. A funny incident that had occurred at one of the stops still brought a smile to her face. At the station, she accidentally bumped into an old classmate who, upon noticing her, exclaimed, "Hey, Eleanor, did you decide to leave all troubles behind and start life on a clean slate?" And laughing added, "I hope there's room on that clean slate not just for tears, but for laughter too." This unexpected encounter reminded her that even in the toughest situations, one can find a reason to laugh, even if that laughter sounds like a challenge to the world. And though the world could be harsh, she was ready to stand up to it, with newfound strength and a sincere smile on her lips. Thus, walking further down the street with a light tap in her heart, Eleanor felt that the morning was not merely the start of a day, but the beginning of a new chapter, in which every emotion, every laugh, and every tear would be both her weapon and her shield. She strode into the unknown, knowing that ahead lay not only struggle, but also a chance to find light, even in the darkest corners of life. And although the past remained behind her, its shadows could not obscure the clear vision of the future. In this new day, full of contradictions and surprises, Eleanor had already begun to write her story anew. A story about how love, pain, humour, and determination can intertwine into a single symphony of life, where every new chord brings hope and the strength to move forward. The bright morning spread over the streets, and smiling to herself, Eleanor realised, It doesn't matter how many times fate tries to knock you off your path. The most important thing is to find the strength to get up and keep going despite all obstacles. That thought, firm and certain, became her new motto, and with renewed hope, she set out to meet her destiny, ready to greet the new day with a smile that had been missing during the dark nights. Thus continued the second chapter of her fate, a chapter full of sorrow and laughter, pain and hope, where every minute brought a lesson and the promise that even if the world crumbles around you, there will always be room in your heart for a new beginning. And in that morning light, where every breath seemed infused with life, Eleanor found that unwavering, indomitable faith that every new step brought her closer to a bright future, where love and laughter would be the main characters of her extraordinary story. The street met Elena with a fierce cold, as if fate itself had decided to test her resilience. With her daughter in her arms, she wandered like a solitary traveller along deserted sidewalks, where the flickering shop window lights and the rare voices of passers-by seemed like echoes of a life long gone. Every raindrop falling from the sky reminded her of a merciless time when the past suddenly collapsed, leaving behind only fragments of hope and delicate threads of pain. Standing by the roadside, Eleanor tried to gather together the events of the past few days. Roman's voice, full of promises and laughter, echoed in her memory, but now it seemed nothing more than a faint reminiscence of long-lost dreams. And the words of her parents' reproaches were like an icy, ruthless verdict that stripped her of any right to mistakes and freedom. In that moment, she felt her soul, like an injured bird, struggling to muster the strength for a new flight despite the heavy wounds of past quarrels and losses. Through her foggy thoughts, still reeling from recent events, she hardly noticed when a stranger in a worn old coat approached her. His face, lit by the soft morning light, expressed both care and sincere sorrow. "Excuse me, could you tell me where one might take shelter from the rain?" he asked, with a light note of irony, as if trying to ease the tension. Eleanor, surprised, raised her eyebrows and momentarily forgot her own pain. Her voice, trembling with fatigue and cold, replied, "Take shelter. I no longer know where my home is. All I have left is this little life in my arms and a few shattered dreams." The stranger smiled, and a spark of understanding flickered in his eyes. "You know, sometimes even in the darkest alleys you can find a corner where a light still glows. I think I know of such a place. There's a small hostel on the corner for those who have lost everything but aren't ready to give up. Would you mind if I helped you?" Eleanor felt the warmth of the stranger seep into the cold of her lonely soul. His voice, filled with genuine compassion, was like a quiet light in the darkness. "Thank you," she murmured softly. "I don't know who you are, but today, your words sound like hope." On the way, the stranger shared his story with her, about how he had once lost everything due to his own stubbornness, but had managed to find strength in the small things. In the smile of a passing stranger, in the aroma of freshly brewed coffee at a little cafe where every regular dreamed of change. His tales, full of gentle irony and poignant wisdom, made Elena forget her bitterness for a moment. A strange dialogue blossomed between them, filled with both jokes and deep reflections. "You know," the stranger said, "life sometimes resembles an old comedy, where everything is funny and tragic at the same time. For example, I once thought I could cheat fate, but fate, it turns out, knows how to hand you lemons not only for lemonade, but also for sour cocktails." Eleanor couldn't help but laugh, and in her eyes flickered the spark that had once warmed her heart. That soft laughter was the first sign of her slowly regaining faith that even after the darkest storms, dawn will break. The stranger led her to the old hostel, where walls covered in graffiti and faded wallpaper held the stories of hundreds of people. Here, among simple souls, she found temporary shelter. In a small common corridor, she overheard two women discussing the latest news. "Can you imagine?" one said. This morning I saw a young mother with her child laughing as if the world were a circus and not a tragedy. Well, she must have a place for joy in her heart, replied the other with a wry smile. These words made Eleanor realize that even in the harshest conditions, life manages to reveal something beautiful and funny. In this dilapidated building, she encountered people who, despite having lost their homes and shattered dreams, had not lost their ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Her new refuge became a small island amid an ocean of life's hardships, where every word, every glance, even a casual greeting reminded her that she was not alone. That evening, sheltered under a creaking roof, Eleanor settled on an old sofa with her daughter, the worn-out furniture seemingly whispering stories of its past owners. In the quiet of the room, broken only by the distant laughter of neighbors, she softly whispered to her daughter, "You know, sweetheart, our life is like a great book, and this chapter is not the end, where now there is cold and darkness. Soon the light will shine again." Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears, but in those tears were determination, hope, and the soft laughter of fate. Even in this abandoned corner where time seemed to stand still, she believed that a new dawn awaited her. A dawn where every loss would turn into a new chance, and every wound would become a lesson that would make her stronger. The next morning, the city awoke to the sounds of rain, which, just like yesterday, relentlessly pounded on ancient roofs and wet streets. But this time, in Elena's soul, there settled not only a sense of loss, but also a quiet certainty that every dawn brings the opportunity to start anew. The hostel where she now temporarily resided, though modest, was a reminder that even in the most unwelcoming places, one can find support and the warmth of human connection. In the corridor, she was greeted by the hostel's landlady, a middle-aged woman with wise eyes and undeniable care. "Good morning, dear. You probably haven't had breakfast yet. Come in, we have fresh borscht today," she said with a smile. Eleanor gratefully accepted the invitation. At the table, among ordinary people discussing the news and sharing life stories, she began to feel the taste of life returning. In the warm atmosphere of the small dining room, she told the landlady about her past, about how love had led her to a fateful choice, about the courage it took to leave when parental reproaches and promises of a better life turned into an icy wall. "You know," the landlady said with a slight smile, "sometimes you have to lose everything to find true wealth. Not money or a home, but what's inside of us. The most important thing is that your heart never stops believing." These simple, wise words struck a chord in Eleanor's soul. She recalled the conversation with the stranger from the previous evening, his words about how life is not only tragedy, but also comedy, where even the heaviest loss can be the beginning of a new, wonderful story. And then, as if by magic, the phone rang. Eleanor hesitated for a moment before answering. The voice on the other end was cold and businesslike. "Hello, Eleanor. This is Roman. We haven't talked in a long time. Can we meet?" Her heart froze and her thoughts raced. How could he suddenly remember her? The conversation was brief and devoid of the passion of the past. Roman explained that he now had his own life, his own concerns and plans. His voice sounded detached, as if an impassable chasm had grown between them. Eleanor quietly replied, "All right, then, good luck, Roman." After hanging up, she felt an odd sense of liberation. All those years filled with pain from his absence, and the chill of indifference finally began to melt away, giving way to a new clarity. In that moment, she realized that one should not wait for someone who doesn't know how to value and love. Love, like life, does not tolerate compromises and lies. That same day, inspired by new encounters and support, Eleanor decided to take another step toward change. In a small corner of the hostel, she set up an impromptu tea club for young mothers, where each could share her story, find comfort in the words of friends, and even laugh at life's absurdities. At the first meeting, over a mug of aromatic tea, one of the participants remarked with irony, "Who would have thought that the tragicomedy of our lives would turn into such a cozy tea party?" Everyone burst into laughter, and that laughter, like precious medicine, filled the room. The looks of understanding and warmth gave Elena the confidence that even after the harshest storm, a rainbow of hope can be found. Days passed steadily and gradually. As she pieced together the fragments of her life, Elena began to see light in the most unexpected places. She found a job at a small pastry shop where she learned not only to bake cakes but also to revive her faith in goodness. Each dessert she prepared became a symbol of a small triumph over the past, and the smiles of customers were proof that life could still bring joy even after loss. One day, when a regular customer, a local professor known for his sincere musings on life, entered the pastry shop, he noticed a photograph on the wall showing Elena with her daughter, smiling in front of an old building. "That's quite a story," he said with a light chuckle. "Life, like fine wine, only gets better with age, even if at first it seems to turn sour." Elena smiled, realizing that this professor, like many others, had managed to see in her fate not only tragedy, but also a reason for laughter and a new beginning. At that moment, she understood that all her trials, every loss and every tear had become stepping stones on the path to rediscovering herself. At sunset, when the sun's rays gilded the city's windows, Eleanor sat on the porch of her new small rented home, secured with her modest earnings. With her daughter playing at her feet, she recalled all the difficult moments and those unexpected gifts of fate that had given her the chance to become stronger. In the dim twilight, her quiet but determined voice resonated. "We've weathered the storm, my dear. Now before us lies a clear sky and endless possibilities. Let the past stay where it belongs, and may the future be filled with light, laughter, and love." In that moment, amid the sounds of the evening city, Elena felt a new fire ignite within her, a fire that would not be extinguished despite all hardships, a fire that promised that even after the longest night, dawn would always break. Thus ended the final chapter of her extraordinary story. A story of a woman who, having endured pain, loss, and betrayal, managed to believe in herself again, in the miracles of life, and in the truth that even in the darkest corners of the soul, there is always room for light, warmth, and, of course, sincere laughter. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If you care about the fates of the characters and appreciate every tale, please leave your comments, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories filled with emotion and heartfelt experiences.